Alan Wake 2, a survival horror game made by Remedy Games, a company known for their reality-bending, next-level action games. They've even taken home the Game of the Year with 2019's Control. But where is this game ranked next to other survival horror games within the genre? What protagonists did I enjoy playing as more? And what's next for the franchise, after the events of Alan Wake 2? Let's find out. But first and foremost, if you've been watching my content for a little bit, please consider subscribing. I post content weekly, and you don't want to miss a thing. Thanks. Graphics and performance. Alan Wake 2 quite honestly has some of the best graphics I've seen this generation so far. This game raises the bar incredibly high, and there's tons of moments where character models and environments were just flat out photorealistic. At times, cutscenes even incorporated live action set pieces, and it only adds to the overall polished look of the game and its reality bending setting. This game, just like most other console games, comes with two separate modes, a performance mode and a quality mode. Performance mode targets higher frame rate at 60 frames per second and 1440p resolution, while the latter focuses on graphical fidelity at 4K resolution with a locked 30 frames per second frame rate. Now, I did try out both these modes, but being a performance mode guy obsessed with frame rate, I found the performance mode to be the better option out of the two. Quality mode has great graphics, but frames do dip very low at times, and just feels rather choppy while playing. Performance mode on the other hand is rather smooth, and runs very well optimized, and I only had a handful of experiences where around launch, the frame rate dropped really low, seemingly around 30 frames, and it was mainly in the outdoor sections of the game. Besides that, the HDR in this game is very beautiful, but at times the game does have issues with lighting around certain times of the day, primarily around the town of Bright Falls inside the cabin, which I really thought was strange considering they used light as a main plot point. Although it was a minor annoyance, it was something overall that I can look past and didn't really hurt my enjoyment within the game much. Game length. Within my first playthrough of Alan Wake 2, it took me around 50 hours on normal difficulty to 100% the game. Give or take a manuscript or two. Now, I would assume for most players, that would be somewhere between 30 to 50 hours on a first time playthrough no matter what difficulty you choose. Majority of my playtime primarily came from exploration, and solving puzzles within the game's world, and combat never really reached great lengths to complete, other than a couple instances. Now, since then, I have restarted the game again on hard difficulty, and I would say with my prior knowledge from my previous playthroughs, along with skipping cutscenes, I managed to fly through the game within 15 to 20 hours, and that's while collecting anything of importance within the game. But overall, I think 50 hours for the first time playthrough is not only fair, but I think it's the perfect length for this kind of game, and replays or speedruns being anywhere from 10 to 20 hours or less is also a great length. Now, obviously people will find other ways to shorten that even further than I can, but for a $70 to $80 game, that is a good value. Now, with all that being said, this game in its current form is without a New Game Plus, but it's been announced that it's going to be added for free at a later date, along with additional manuscripts, story-related content, and a newly added difficulty, Nightmare Mode. Story and protagonists. Alan Wake 2's story was so great, I didn't want it to end as it unraveled upon itself. This story is deep. The alternate reality story building is so incredible, it felt like it paralleled our own at times. In this game you play as two main characters, an FBI agent Saga Anderson, and a famous writer who's been missing for 13 years after the events of the first game, Alan Wake. Now, the game's name might be Alan Wake 2, but make no mistake, this is Saga Anderson's game this time around. You start the game off playing as Saga, as her and her partner, Agent Alex Casey, gets put onto a new homicide investigation at a place called Cauldron Lake. Along the way, they encounter many leads, which points to the work of a cult. But everything ain't as it seems as time progresses, and Saga gets deeper into her investigation, and things within the real world begins to change. On the alternative, you play as Alan Wake, trapped in an area called the Dark Place after the events of the first game. His primary goal is trying to find his way home and out of the nightmare he's been replaying on repeat for 13 years. Desperate times calls for desperate measures, and he's begun to write manuscripts out of the hopes that he'll change the present and gain the attention of Saga Anderson in the real world to help him return home. Alan Wake 2 does a fantastic job with subverting the player's expectations, and at the end of every chapter, the game was in an entirely new place from where that chapter started. Acting within the game is also top of the line, and characters are well developed. I just hope that whatever the planned DLCs are, that they'll achieve the same heights and payouts that the main story did. This game in many ways achieved the impossible, introducing Saga Anderson as a new main character into the title character's game, all while still paying respect to Alan Wake. Gameplay and exploration. Both our main characters within Alan Wake 2 have similar gameplay mechanics and explorational depth. But what's entirely different within the two are their loadouts and the areas that they get to explore. Both Saga and Alan share mechanics to use their flashlights and light sources as a means to drop enemy shields and to weaken them. That's kind of what gameplay is centered around, and what makes Alan Wake stand on its own compared to other survival horror games. And survival horror is exactly what this is. This game has all the things you would see inside of a survival horror game, whether that's save rooms, item boxes, backtracking, or puzzles and riddles around every corner. One of my main gripes with Alan Wake 2 though, is the item management could feel smoother, and it feels sorta clunky at times. Same with pulling up the map. At times, I've had to click the map button about 2 to 3 times for it to pull up. Between the two protagonists, Saga Anderson's storyline feels more fleshed out than Alan Wake's, and it seems intentional. Saga has more weapons and item slots, and her story finds her completing nursery rhyme riddles to obtain charms, which will give passive bonuses to Saga, along with cult boxes to unlock for excess loot, or lunch boxes that contain ripped up pieces of manuscripts, which is used as currency in Saga's mind place to upgrade her weapons. Likewise for Alan, he'll find yellow painted arrows on walls and environments that are only seen through the shine of his flashlight to uncover something known as a word of power, which will give Alan passive bonuses to himself and his weapons, so in this case they combine the two. Saga's real world sections has wide open areas where backtracking is substantial, and as someone who loves survival horror genre, it gave me massive Silent Hill 2 vibes while wandering around the different towns in the game. Alan Wake's sections cover a very small section of New York compared to Saga's sections, and although you do explore multiple areas such as subways and hotels, it never really achieves the same heights as Saga's parts of the game for me. One of the major new aspects of Alan Wake 2 is Saga's mind place. In here, you can do multiple things such as use the caseboard to help her gather evidence to further her investigations, or profile a suspect. Now, Alan also has a mind place, but his interacts differently by giving us a storyboard where we can lay different plot points on, and depending on which plot point you lay, it'll change locations of crime scenes within the dark place and show either a path forward or show a location of a hidden key item to progress. Now this is actually super cool, and it adds to the game's identity as a whole. On subsequent playthroughs, progressing Saga's caseboard in particular can be immersion breaking and tiring at times. But if you know what you're doing, then all you need is one specific piece of evidence to progress the game forward instead of spending time placing every single piece. I will admit though, if you play this way, then shuffling through evidence will become the new problem you'll face. But when it comes to a speedrun, that just adds to the overall knowledge you'll need of the game in order to pull off a fast time. Combat. Fighting the Taken and cultists inside of Alan Wake 2 isn't technically special by any means, but it sure is fun. Saga and Alan are loaded up with weaponry such as handguns and shotguns, but they're also accompanied by some more unique weapons you'll only find in an Alan Wake game such as flashlights, flare guns, and flashbangs. Flare sticks can be used as defense items if the player gets grabbed, along with taking down multiple enemy shields at a time if you were to light one. Both protagonists have a dodge to avoid hits and throwing items such as axes, and to heal you quick slot painkillers and medkits to heal over time. Majority of the challenge in the combat comes in the form of item management, and making sure you stay equipped for any encounter at any time. Likewise, ensuring you find safe places to be able to heal, since it's not instant and in some locations you have light sources which act as safe zones, and inside them you'll regain small portions of your health if you're in critical condition and enemies aren't able to see you once you're inside, almost as if the light blinds the enemies. But beware, because as soon as you fire that first shot, that light source is gone for the remainder of that encounter. Combat in Alan Wake 2 has a great way of building tension, especially in hard difficulty. It's traditional survival horror at its finest, and personally, I love it. Difficulty. At launch, Alan Wake 2 had 3 difficulties to choose from: Story, Normal, and Hard. Story mode is exactly what you would expect. Its purpose is solely for people to experience the story with little to no challenge at all. Normal was my first playthrough, and it had some challenge, although not much. I only died a handful of times, and after about halfway through the game, I noticed my inventory becoming jam-packed. And eventually my shoebox became full, and it really just became a pain in my ass having to delete and use up unnecessary items. Hard mode is much better in that aspect. I died more often, and item management, although it wasn't perfect and I experienced the same issues eventually, it seemed like the way to play as a survival horror veteran obsessed with item conservation. A 4th, ultra hard difficulty mode will eventually be added to the game with new manuscripts and story beats at a later date for free. Bosses and enemy variety. Overall, enemy variety is probably the most lacking aspect of Alan Wake 2, but that doesn't mean that what we do have isn't great and they aren't fun to interact with. You have the generic cultist, Taken, and human type enemies in Saga's story, with some brute variations and the occasional wolf or two. Then in Alan's story you have shadow people, who are actually some of the coolest enemies in the game for me, and are really intense to interact with sometimes, because they will mainly dissolve away once Alan gets close to them, but occasionally they will throw Alan or attack him, and once that happens, Alan has to use his flashlight to expose their true form, which resembles a transparent humanoid. Bosses within the game are typical survival horror bullet sponges with unique gimmicks. It's basically an ammo check to ensure you save ammo properly for the big fights, but as stated before, you'll probably be loaded up on ammo by these points in the game. All you need to do is stack up accordingly. Final score, 10 out of 10. Ultimately, Alan Wake 2 was a memorable experience for me. This game, once it's all said and done and we have all the content available, in my opinion, will be one of the best survival horror games of all time, especially in the modern era. As a horror fan, we've been eating so good lately. 2023 has been one of the greatest years in all of survival horror, starting with the Dead Space remake, then RE4 remake, and now Alan Wake 2. In my opinion, it'll be remembered near the top with some of the greatest in the genre. Next up is the Silent Hill 2 remake, and I must say, this game gave me so much Silent Hill vibes that it makes me want it even more, and I'm also wondering if the new remake will be able to live up to this. Guess we're gonna have to wait and see. But for now, I'm looking forward to whatever Alan Wake content is on the horizon. Now thank you guys so much if you stayed the entire time. Alan Wake 2 is incredible. Now let me know in the comments section, what protagonist did you guys enjoy playing as most? Do you guys think that survival horror is thriving right now? Do you think that Alan Wake 2 is the next face of survival horror? Let me know all of it in the comments section. Now remember to like, comment, subscribe, do anything you guys can to help me. I am just one guy and I make these videos because it is my passion. So thank you very much. This has been Drew Spacely. Peace. Oh my god, she fucked that dude up.